Welcome to the Motoring Podcast, a Porsche Experience Special Edition. Hello, I'm Alan.
Hello, I'm Andrew. Okay, Alan. So, what is a
No,
Porsche experience? What
what,
is it? You got near a Porsche? What you
what people
looked at a
don't
Porsche?
what people don't understand is that we've just had a small debate about how to title this. That was what we settled on, and I read it out loud, and it didn't sound quite right. But I've recorded it now,
I thought it sounded lovely.
and we're sticking with it.
So, go on then. What is the Porsche experience that you
Well,
experienced?
Do we want to just begin at the beginning
I think that's wise.
with this one? We will get to that. I mean, I've got a whole load of other stuff to talk about first. But yeah, we'll get to that. So yeah, I was on holiday. I was on vacation because I've got to be bilingual these days, and I had planned to this year. I'm not going to bore you with my holiday road trip, although some of you might be interested. But on the other hand, I was on holiday, so I wasn't actually making notes, with this one exception, because my route took me up via Atlanta anyway, and a friend of mine from school has also moved from the UK to the US with work, and we'd been sort of keeping in touch and stuff. And he said, if you're down around Atlanta, give us a shout. So I did.
Okay.
He happens to work for Porsche,
Ah.
conveniently. So the original plan was just to meet for lunch, and they said, "Hey, I've managed to Hey, if you've got time, I've managed to organise this." So I didn't put up a fight.
I was going to say, how hard was your arm twisted, Alan? Was it?
It was not twisted very hard at all. It was like, yeah, sure, if that were Friday, it's your working day. So it did not take a lot of twisting, for me to go, yeah, sure, let me just shuffle some stuff and I'll do it anytime. So yes, I managed to squeeze it in before going to Hartsfield, Alabama, to see the Rocket City Trash Pandas get beaten by the Chattanooga Lookouts in baseball, which I still have no idea what went on there, but I do have more idea of what goes on at the headquarters of Porsche for North America.
How did the day? Do you want to run through the day, sort of almost blow by blow, as it were? Not every little bit, but sort of how you experienced it as you turned up,
No,
etc.
because that just makes me feel slightly ick. So what I'm going to do is tell you all about the headquarters. Because they're really, really cool.
Okay.
They're cool enough that if you've watched some of the Marvel movies, which actually I haven't, if you've watched some of the Marvel movies, you will have seen the building, and in fact, you'll even have seen the building get blown up, because it's the filming location for the Avengers headquarters. That's how sort of cool it is. So it's very much all sort of white and glass, and it's got this kind of courtyard outside where they can sort of show stuff and preview stuff without too many people seeing. I mean, not that you would... I was going to say not that you would see it anyway, but, thousands of people a day can actually see it. But a lot of that is because it is right at the end of the runway of the busiest airport in the world, Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson. There is a flight every 40 seconds.
Oh, wow.
That passes not quite over the building, but passes over one of the test and experience tracks there. And I said the building's just really awesome, sort of open plan. It's a little bit McLaren technical center,
Okay,
styly type setup. If you imagine that with the glass and the pillars and the double height and and all of that,
shouting future and technology.
It does shout future and technology. It's part of the headquarters for Porsche North America. The address is rather cool. It's 1 Porsche Drive. Yeah, well, it doesn't tell you is Porsche Drive is just off the Old Dixie Highway, which sounds far more Brer Rabbit than anything about Porsche Drive. But it's kind of Alabama for you. So as well as all the sort of PR, the finance, the marketing, all of that stuff, it also houses one of the US's 3 Porsche Experience Centers. The others being in Los Angeles, or just outside Los Angeles, and also in Birmingham, Alabama.
Okay.
Which is kind of close. So that just seemed like there were 2 very close to each other.
Yeah.
And then one far, far away. But I imagine that, Atlanta makes a lot of sense because it's just connected from everywhere.
Yeah, you're by the airport, as you say. Yep.
Just in case any of you are curious and wondering, and to make this UK relevant, the one in the UK is at Silverstone, as I'm sure many folk are aware.
Mm-hmm.
You can, as well as lots of other bits and pieces, you can choose to collect your new Porsche there.
Oh, okay.
Whichever one it is. There's a sort of nominal upcharge compared to collecting it from your dealer down the road. But if you do the Experience Center collection, then you can also get a sort of demo, sort of small driving experience in an equivalent vehicle to your new one. Not your brand new vehicle, but an equivalent spec, roughly equivalent spec one. So you have an idea of what the car feels like, what the car can do, all of these things. So whilst I was there, there was at least one person collecting a new KN, for example, and doing the sort of KN demonstration and driving bit, just so that they've got an idea of what the vehicle's capable of in ways that you
gotcha. Yes,
you shouldn't be testing on the public highway. Also, there you can take one or more Porsche experiences. There's lots of stuff that you can choose from demo laps in a KN, and a pro driver showing you what they can do, right the way up to sort of many hours worth of experiences comparing a new Turbo S to a 911 GT3, or there's even one which is a Manthey Racing Cayman, I think, is it GT3 RS?
Okay.
to a more normal Batpool Cayman. So there's loads of stuff right across the full range.
Okay.
If you want to drive a lap in a Boxster S, you can. Kind of have to book in advance, by the way. You can do that from there'll be a link in the show notes. Silverstone offers similar but different experiences as well. I think the setup of the track, it's not. I'm not sure the Silverstone one is a dedicated track, dedicated just to Porsche. Whereas in Atlanta they have the luxury, and we'll explain them in a couple of minutes, of 2 tracks to play with.
Well, to be fair, they've got the space.
Well, yes, kind of. Well, to be honest, what the Porsche have done is they've got this little corner at the end of the runway between an interstate and another highway, and they've sort of managed to squidge in 2 tracks, a couple of buildings that we're going to talk about, and some other bits and pieces. They don't actually have a load of space. I've got more space in the Porsche HQ in Reading, but they don't have an IKEA next door, unlike the Porsche HQ in Reading. You've got to balance these things out somehow. Inside, by the way, if you are fortunate enough to visit, and you do have to get in via a gate and a security thing and already booked something, so you can't just pop in. You do have to have booked something. There is also a restaurant stuff there, so if you're doing it for a birthday, you can, if you're doing it for a birthday present or something like that, you can have the experience, and you can have lunch and stuff, and you can, I guess, turn it into a thing. Couple of display areas as well, which were nice. There was the new Macan EV was on display there. Couldn't get up close to it. It was kind of on a little stand because it was still one of the pre-production prototypes. Some cool Porsche themed artwork. There were notable race cars. Rothman's liveried I've forgotten the number now. I was going to say 935. I don't think it is a 935. All sorts of bits and pieces. And as I say, sculptures and artworks and sort of demo things of all the colours you can pay extra for. You can have your cars in and all these kind of things all up, so you can sort of you can have the driving experience. Look wistfully at what specification you could well choose. And I don't think you can buy one there, but then you can spin off a spec and send it to a dealer, I guess, afterwards and stuff. So it really cool, nice place. Lovely corporate offices. If you work there, lovely corporate offices. There was one other thing, because the 918 Spider, there was a 918 Spider sitting there quite nicely. And it was the press car that you've seen in loads and loads of stuff. Anytime, any magazine or bigger YouTube channels were driving the 918 Spider in the US, then it will have been that one. One cool thing that came out when we were chatting is that the notable press cars, Porsche, certainly in the US, they've all got proper names. So they're not just referred to as the whatever. They are actually given a name and then referred to as that, so everybody knows what they're talking about. Which was kind of funny. Sounds a bit weird. I didn't make a note of it because I wasn't wandering around with a little notebook. I'm not a very good mojo. There was
on your holiday.
On my holiday, exactly. It just made me laugh. I just thought that was it was just a nice thing, because I guess when you work with some of these vehicles and they become really important for 3, 6, 9 months of your life. And there's always, especially when it's a special one like that, where you're not going to have more than one on the press fleet and stuff, and it's not going to be rotating off.
Yeah.
And their one, for example, can never be sold.
Okay.
Because it's a pre-production car, it can only be crushed.
Right. Okay.
So as a result, they're kind of fond of it. It's done lots of really cool stuff. So it's never going to be sold. So it's going to hang around and be used for exhibiting and stuff. But you can see all the little stone chips and all the grit in it, and all the kind of stuff that just shows it's been used on the road, which was fun. But I just really liked the naming. That just seemed like a nice thing.
Yeah.
So what else did we do? Oh, one of the other cool things they've got there, which you'd have to go to Stuttgart to do, have done, see, whatever, anywhere else, is they have a whole classic department.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So it's one of only 2 places in the world where you can get a Porsche factory restoration, despite the fact it isn't a factory. And that's Atlanta and Stuttgart.
Oh, very cool.
It used to be 3 bays in the main building.
By any chance, has this expanded somewhat as car companies realise there is quite a bit of money to be made from the restoration of our past classic models?
Yes, it now has its own building. It now has its own building with, I can't remember, I didn't count, but between 10 and 15 ramps, lifts.
All busy.
Yes, and a paint shop. And a storage area for the queue of customer cars ready to be ready and waiting to be restored at some point. People have bought them; they've agreed what they kind of want, or they know it's there, and so that the shells or the cars are there under a cover in the queue, waiting to get to the front, or waiting for sort of final approval and these kind of things.
Now. How long did you stand there dribbling at what you saw? Because obviously you couldn't take any pictures because it's...
I could have, but I didn't really want to. I took one picture when I was in there, but it just seemed bad form. So
it's people's cars, isn't it? It's not like it's the showroom.
It's not that they have the license plates on show and stuff, but yeah, it was people's cars and people working and it just didn't feel right.
So was it just like all?
And I was being shown around by a mate, not like an organised tour type thing.
Yeah, okay. Was it like all 911s, or was it a mix of newer?
It was an absolute
older
mix. So in there were a couple of 356s. This is what happened to be on the ramp at that moment. I mean, there were a multiplicity of most things. There was, I think there was a 911 SC, sort of 1980s one.
Cool.
And there was at least one 964, and that kind of thing. There was also, just to drop it in at the end, there was also a 959, which had its rear wings removed and thing, and was getting a major service when it was in. And I can't remember the last time I saw a 959. It may have been at the old Porsche Museum in Stuttgart. It's not really something you trip over very often.
Okay. So what
It was so small.
It sounds like they offer the full gambit then at that place.
Yeah, so you can have any. So you can. They can do whatever you want to an extent. Yeah, within the bounds of.
We're not talking resto mod type stuff where they change, but
Well, they can.
oh, okay. Oh
You
dear.
could, if you wanted.
You didn't see any of that, did you?
You
It didn't
could.
bring you out in hives.
There were a couple, and I was like, but there was no. But you can. I mean, within the grounds of I won't say good taste, and I don't mean aesthetic taste. I mean, I mean sort of general. Yes, I mean you couldn't have something rude or whatever on it. It's kind of where I'm going. But in theory, you could have whatever you wanted as a combination. And if you have the money, they could do almost anything.
So it's
It's
also
truly
a bespoke service as well as.
And it's not just the car. If you wanted matching luggage, matching handbag.
Oh, okay. So they've gone that far.
That far. If you want specific accessories, you want a toolkit in tan leather and green tweed, and what do you want? Do you want the standard level toolkit, or do you want the top level titanium tools in it? Which do you want? And
it sounds like they've watched Drew and Paul Cowland on and how they make luggage for cars.
It's that and
Okay.
and more, and it was so cool. So an example of the kind of thing. There's a couple of examples. So one of which is that was one of their earlier projects in the new building, was the Sally Porsche. You know, the Sally from Cars Porsche that was sold for auction for $2.1 million or something dollars. Yeah, for charity.
Yes.
So we had a bit of a chat about that, and just the level of detail they went into for that. Because the wheels are not wheels you can get anywhere else. They are Porsche wheels, but they are chromed and finished in a specific way to make them match the movie car. The headlamps for that generation of Porsche that it was based on should have had a dark interior. It wasn't. They were completely... The headlamp manufacturer did custom finish of headlamp to make it match what it should have looked like from cars. So
this wasn't
if you have the money,
weekend project. This was if we're going to do this, we're doing it properly.
No, we talked about it a little more than that. I'm not going to go into it all, but it was not a weekend project. No, it was quite a stressful time to just hope that all this work was going to pay off. In terms of the car raising enough money, they sort of had a minimum they really hoped for, and it was much less than it went for. They made a lot of money for charity, and the chap who bought it and his family raise even more money for charity with it as well.
Oh, okay, cool, very cool,
happy ending on that one. But he also uses it, and that causes a little bit of fear should anything actually happen to it.
Yeah, I would imagine his insurance is spicy.
I would imagine it would cover it if you're going to do that. So one example that was really cool to see, again, from the movies, Transformers movie. Unusually, the hero car is a proper hero car. It isn't, how movie cars tend to be made to look fine on screen, but really they're pretty shabby and a bit crap, for want of a better term. The hero car for Mirage in the Transformers movie, 911 Turbo, is a real one.
Okay.
And the actual hero car was built by Porsche in Atlanta.
All right.
And it happened to just be there sitting in the corner when I was there, and it's finished right down to the stereo has a little sort of glowing. I can never remember if he's a Decepticon or an Autobot. It must be an Autobot. It has a little glowing thing that glows whenever they speak and communicate to each other from inside, and it's finished to that level, and it's all perfect.
Very cool.
It was very cool, especially when, movie cars, you see them close up, they're always a bit scuffed and rubbish. Absolutely not. And that was the one from the movie. So that was kind of awesome.
Now, look, I know I prodded you quite early on about the resto mods and stuff. Did you discuss them with Porsche employees, and
they came up?
Was there any feedback on that?
The basic outcome was probably the most famous ones are really good and really well done and beautifully finished and incredibly sympathetic and done right. Mm-hmm. Some of the others, not so much. There is a difference in standard.
So the feedback was not that we object to them or love them. It's a case by case on how it's been done.
I mean, the thing is, the cars have often been out of the Porsche dealership network for a long time.
Yeah, of course.
And actually, in some ways, they're more likely to come back into it once it's been done, I suppose. It's not something they can make money of unless somebody actually wants them to do it, in which case that's probably one of the more expensive ways to do it. But you also get exactly what you want.
Mm. So talking of getting what you want, I presume, having been round Bentley and looked in various areas where you're allowed to do your personalisation, how big and extensive were the rooms and materials on show?
There were a couple of little boardrooms. They weren't so big that they were intimidating or anything. And what was cool was there were like glass walls, which is really kind of cunning. It's a bit like those restaurants where you can see into the kitchen, because the glass wall. So you could kind of see ones that have been done. You could see ones that were in progress. Obviously,
someone starts pointing at material and turns around and sees everyone going, "Oh no!"
I know.
Actually, maybe I shouldn't pick the purple.
Yeah. That's trouble. So a
but
couple
for your interior,
it depends. The couple of those, with the whole wall of paint and leather and cloth swatches and all these kind of things, and sort of historic Porsche inspirational pictures on the walls and and that kind of thing.
You get to actually touch and feel the material as well, particularly if it's the interior side of things.
And you know what? For that kind of thing, you not just touch and feel, but I'm sure you could just pick it up and take and step outside because you're still within the Porsche compound type thing.
Yeah. Or what's it look like in
place
normal
it
light
against
or sunlight,
place it against a similar car or any of these kind of things. So it looked like somewhere where it would be very easy to make decisions that could cost a lot of money, but that you could be very happy with once it was done.
Yep.
Yeah, it was. I really enjoyed that, and that's something. It's not really. It's definitely not. It's not open to the public or anything. So I've just made an "I'm special" type comment, and I didn't mean it that way. But it.
Yes, you did.
I did, but it was really cool because that's as interesting as the new cars to me.
Mm-hmm.
So
when they prize you away from drooling over all the cars in the thing,
I was conscious. Or the trouble is, I was conscious all the way all the way around that it was the middle of the working day, and that and that I didn't want to impose in that kind of way. So we didn't. I tried not to be too much of a nerd. It was really hard.
Tried not to be too much of a nerd. Okay, so what did you do after?
Well, the thing is that I've not done this all in chronological order. Because actually what we did first was I went out on track.
Okay. So how was it on track, Alan?
It was all right. Yeah, it was fine. I mean, I should explain quickly that some of the other stuff that's there before we get to the track bit, I'm really eking this out. This is like one of these YouTubers at the end of it will tell you what colour we're going to wrap the door mirrors.
You won't believe what's number 11.
Yeah. So 2 tracks in Atlanta. One is the small mile handling circuit, and the second one is called the West Track. So the mile handling circuit circuit is about a mile long. This is a surprise, isn't it? And it's very much all about handling. So it is.
It's like they've listened to the Motoring Podcast and gone, that's a great way to name things.
So it's quite small. It's not meant for speed. Neither of them particularly are, to be honest, because speed brings all sorts of other infrastructure things you need to include. But it's very it's quite. There's a couple of straights, but it's quite narrow. It twists quite a lot.
So it's it's
very
track.
technical. It's a lot more like a very small version of some of the stuff at Millbrook.
Okay, yeah.
Those of you who are familiar with it, but it doesn't have the elevation changes, given that it's right at the end of the runway, and it is literally under the end of the runway if you look on Apple Maps or Google Maps and stuff, and I've basically given you the address, so you might as well so go look on Apple and Google Maps and see that it really is right under the runway, so right under the flight path. So not a lot of elevation change, a little bit that they could get away with, but not an awful lot. The west track, far more elevation change because it's just off to the side of the runways.
Okay.
So far more ups and downs. It is the best of some racetrack race corners that you may be familiar with. There's a carousel. There's a corkscrew. There's another couple. There's a slightly longer straight than the miles handling track has. It seemed to be used more for some of the more racy cars because there was much more camber on the corners and these kind of things, which let you use them a bit more. There's also a couple of off-road tracks around, sort of dotted in amongst, fitted in the middles of the tracks. And that, for showing off McCann and Cayman and stuff for off-road ability. There's also an ice hill. So if you imagine,
which you often encounter in Georgia, right?
Have you seen some of the Porsche stunts that they've been doing recently about climbing mountains?
Well, yes, that is true.
It can just show the traction even for Carrera 4s and these kind of things.
So, did you just look at these tracks, or did you get some time on them?
So yes, I did. I got. So I had an instructor to myself, a chap called Garrett.
Sorry, Garrett.
Yeah, that's what I said at the start. I had two Porsche.
Did he shout at you?
No,
until you broke the engine.
He did not shout at me. He did not swear at me either.
To go faster.
I'd like to point out.
Yes, maybe some friends of the show could learn some teaching techniques.
I think there's a difference between one-on-one with me and being, someone who's employed.
Yes.
To show people who spent a lot of
one piece.
Yeah, needs a car to come back in one piece. Well, no. That's kind of unfair on. That's kind of unfair on the other person.
I'm happy to be unfair to him.
Yeah, I had one instructor, two Porsche, and basically I had free run of the mile handling circuit and the dynamics area and skid pan for an hour and a half.
Cool. That sounds awesome fun. I presume after a couple of... Did it go along the lines, say on the handling one, that he helped get you on the right lines through the corners and all that sort of stuff?
So yeah, so let's run through the cars first. I will get there eventually, guys.
Okay,
folks, okay. I promise. By the way, this is a comparison you can book. It is called the mid versus rear engine one. Normally, it's maybe a little more structured than we did. I'm told my sort of mojo creds gave me a little bit more freedom about saying what we'll do and when. I think it's normally a little more structured, but probably very similar to what made sense to do on the day. So I had at my disposal a 718 Boxster GTS. That's the 4-litre mid-mounted flat 6, putting out 392 horsepower, a top speed of 178 miles an hour, and a 0 to 60 miles an hour in 3.8 seconds for the PDK with Sport Chrono package, which seemed to be how mine was spec'd. Don't have spec sheets for them because because just. But roughly spec'd out, from what I can remember, it's about $111,000 plus tax and registration because America. Collected from Atlanta. About $9,000 of that was options. I can't be too accurate, so I don't have spec sheets, so I was going from memory.
Okay.
I also had a 911 GTS. I think the one that's just been superseded because there were slight changes to like the front, but here is damn it. It's the 4-litre rear-mounted flat six, putting out 532 brake horsepower, top speed of 194 miles an hour, and 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds.
Which is brisk.
So top speed, so base price for a 911 GTS in coupe in the US is $164,000 plus tax and registration. As tested, it was about $183,000 plus everything else. Again, no spec sheets, so just that list. It was a shock to sit in a sports car after over a year of almost exclusively driving my body-on-frame off-roader.
So when you went into the first corner, were you leaning in anticipation to counter?
I was already
boat-like handling.
I'd moved 3 feet, and I was like, "Oh my god, steering feel! What is this thing? It's rack and pinion, not recirculating ball. Oh my god, I can feel stuff.
It's just like it's on rails."
Yes. So there was a certain amount of sort of system shock, and oh god, I've missed this so much. Even just sitting low,
yeah.
It was worryingly strange. And I did warn the chat before. I was like, look, I have driven body on frame off-roader, practically nothing else, for well over a year. I might be out of practice here. But I absolutely love going out on track with an instructor. I adore it.
Especially
so
if they
fun.
work out you're not trying to be a hero, or you pretend you're a helmsman or some such nonsense.
I had this book, and I looked at some of the reviews on Google or Yelp or wherever of it, because you know what it is. You look at it on the. You search for it on the Maps app, and it always comes up with reviews. And someone gave it 2 stars. It was like, "Oh, the driver acted like a know-it-all. He was like this." And I was like, "You've obviously never met a race driver before, because that's a perfect description of a race driver." And also, I bet they hated you too. It was one of those ones. Anyway, yes. So once I got over the shock, amazing how different the 2 cars feel whenever you sit in them back to back. As much in terms of scale as anything else, I never thought I'd say that a 911 felt really big.
It isn't tiny anymore.
It really isn't, and it was mostly the width.
Because they're wide, aren't they?
Well, that's
they are wide.
Exactly it. It was the width of the transmission tunnel down the middle, the breadth of the dashboard, all of that kind of thing. But it still felt cozy and stuff. But I was amazed at just how, before you've moved, when you've sat in it and you've adjusted the seats and the mirrors and the steering wheel so you're comfy, at that point, just how different they felt. Because it used to be one of those things where, bloke down the pub would go, "Oh, well, I wouldn't buy a 911 now. I'd buy one of those Boxsters. It's just the same thing, really."
Yeah.
It's not. Certainly not right now.
They've done a cracking job of differentiating the models in their range.
Justifying that $40,000 upsell.
Well, yeah.
Yes. Yes, I mean, they do feel very different. And of course, that's the whole point of this exercise, really, is the difference between the feel and the handling and just the everything of the mid-engine versus the rear engine. So I went out and Boxster first, did a few laps of the handling circuit just partly to learn the circuit until there's a point where you're kind of happy with it, to remind myself what steering feels like, all of these kind of things, and just get back into it. And yeah, as I put in the notes, to driving vehicles that handle better than a stack of spuds. I was in a restaurant in somewhere, and I ended up chatting to the people at the next table, and got my car stuff, and I said, oh, you have to do Tail of the Dragon. It was like, I really don't have to. I would love to do Tail of the Dragon in North Carolina, I think. It's one of the Carolinas it's in. It's a very wiggly road. Although it's just like normally wiggly for those of us who grew up in the Highlands, And it was like, yeah, I would love to do it. Oh, you should go. It's like, I'm not doing it this time because, quite frankly, there is no point in going with my car. It's just be unpleasant. But I'd love to. Anyway, I will get back on track. I'm sorry, I'm tangential.
Literally
everywhere. Literally. So, and the Boxster, it was kind of fun. And it dawned on me, I've not driven that many mid-engine cars.
Okay.
Just the way it's fallen. I've driven a few, but I've not owned any. And obviously that there's the steering feel, the weight and directness, and the steering was. Remember what I'm comparing it to, folks. The steering felt relatively heavy, not heavy, but there was a firmness to it. You could still feel
definite
what was happening, but there was a weight in there, and of course it needed more than just fingertips. So.
But wouldn't you hope for that in such...
Not necessarily, because it's not about the weight, it's about the responsiveness.
Yeah, but in the GTS...
Yeah. I mean, it's not a bad... It's not a criticism. It's an observation.
No, I'm not saying it is, but wouldn't you... It would be interesting to hear if you tried one lower down the spec sheet.
Yes, I'm sure. And of course, this one had adaptable all things, and it was all in Sport Plus and whatever else. All the things I wouldn't normally touch, but as soon as a race driver gets in, they sort of have this natural need to sort of flick all the switches to make everything red.
Yes, it's the only colour I worked.
We didn't start with everything off, I think, and which obviously makes sense to make sure that I wasn't going to intentionally be a special person.
Yeah,
and that was fine. I didn't care. I was as always concerned with not being that guy. Especially when partway round there was a set of skid marks at one corner which just went straight on towards a banking, and I thought, please don't let me do that. But but I think what overall, it was so whilst there was a bit of weight, there was some the steering was. You didn't have to think about the steering, and the steering is the most important part of this because it was a handling circuit. You didn't have to think about the steering. It just, I want to be there, so it was just instinctive to go where you needed to go, as opposed to think about how many laps of the wheel do I need to put in here. And
so it was right.
Oh yeah, it was all right. I mean, come on, Porsche have been doing this for.
No,
but yes, it was course, absolutely
but you found it right.
I
yourself,
found it right
because each person is different, aren't they?
Yeah. I found it right for me, and I found the whole thing incredibly secure, incredibly safe, and unscary. You could make decent progress. If I was on my own, on a road I know, then you could make some good progress in this, cutting, across the Highlands or across Northamptonshire or across Rutland. You can make progress.
You can get to where you were aiming for rather quickly.
Yeah, without it being scary. I mean, and obviously, we're talking 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds. So when you got to the straights and you nailed it, you knew you were moving, and then you hit the brakes and right back down again.
So how were the brakes? Were they?
They were good. Both cases, by the way, it was steel brakes, not carbon ceramics. So there was no warm up. There was no scary few laps or anything like that. No, it was steel brakes, and the brakes were good. They stopped the car,
and not in a scary way.
Not in a scary way. So after a few laps, switched to the 911.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not just when you first sit in it, it feels different. As soon as you move off, the steering was so much lighter, and the steering was, because of where the the weight is in the car. And I know that the 911s aren't like the 911s used to be and stuff. Because of where the weight is in the car, obviously there's less on the front. So the steering doesn't have to be. It was much more fingertip like, and because there wasn't that weight over it, I felt there was more feedback coming through. There was more alertness. This sounds so pretentious. This is what I was scared of.
What I'm hearing,
what I was
Alan,
scared
and
of,
I think,
because I'd sound like some of the
listeners are
hearing
is that you felt that the 911 was much more you than the Boxster.
We were coming to that. No, they're different. I mean, I would have both.
Okay.
I definitely wouldn't have neither. I would have both. Yeah, through choice, I'd have both. No. The 911. So it was. It again. It would just. It felt much. It was weird because whilst, to me, the Boxster felt that everything was. For that track, everything was together. I expected it to be a bit noisy. I expected the steering to be a little bit heavy, a little bit firm like it was. I expected it. I mean, it was a pretty smooth track, so it was very hard to tell about, ride comfort or any of these things. And quite frankly, I wasn't concentrating that. I was concentrating on not crashing.
Yes.
And, but the 911, I think because it just felt too big for that track.
Oh, okay.
It's one of those ones. There was a discussion had afterwards. For going around that track or for crossing Perthshire or Rutland or whatever, the Boxster was the right size. Okay. For doing the road trip I was on at the time, the Boxster would have been almost insufferable, and the 911 was definitely the right car.
Okay.
So it's all about use. I can't at any point here say
911 almost a GT.
911 almost a GT, apart from the fact that it does 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds, and goodness me, are you aware of that?
I take it those straights were incredibly shorter.
They got much. The straights got much shorter in the 911. The corners became much twistier in the 911 as well, because it was much harder to just kind of clip them and straighten them out with a smaller car. And it was, but the 911, it always felt a little bit more like, if you weren't careful, I'm sure some form of stability would have kicked in at some point, but it was just, be more careful, make sure you're straight before you nail it, make sure that kind of carefulness. It's not quite, but like the first roundabout I ever came to with the RX-8, having just traded in a Yaris SR, and I sort of hit it, but I did it at the wrong point on the roundabout, and within 300 meters of leaving Rockingham Mazda, I had already had to use a dab of Oppo. And with the 911, obviously I didn't want that. You learn from these experiences, and I didn't want that to happen on track with an instructor. But it felt like it could, if you weren't concentrating, if you forgot what you were driving, if you drove it like a front-wheel drive hatchback, it will bite you.
Okay.
And it would try to bite you, whilst also being bloody quick. But it felt good. It was good. It's just too small a track for that car.
But that's emphasizing they are different.
Very much different cars.
Mm-hmm.
So we swapped back again to the Boxster, because it was like, well, what does it... Because, of course, we had the handling pad too. So we actually had a safe way of finding out what happened if something went wrong.
Yeah.
How does it feel? How easy is it to get back again? Down the middle of the handling track, there is a skid pan with a kick plate at one end. So It's all water down it. There's a slippery surface in the middle. There's grippy surfaces off to the side to stop you continuing until you hit something. But you drive over the kick plate. For those of you who don't know, you go over the kick plate and it moves. It flicks you.
Right.
So that, one way or the other, so that it puts the back end out of shape, and then you have to correct it. which is quite, the first one is always, you always duff up on the first one, really, even though you're expecting it because you're so tense of what's going to happen. And again, just how much, I mean, after a couple of goes, and once you'd seen it, once you knew how it was going to react, then obviously you could catch the 911 as well. You know, even at 30, 40 miles an hour, and the kick plate is really aggressive, so it's the equivalent of it kicking out at much higher speed.
Right.
Then, and 30 miles an hour going over a kick plate feels like a lot of speed going over a kick plate, because all of a sudden your car's stepping a foot to the right or something, you know, at the back. It's really sudden. It's proper hitting black ice job.
Okay.
And after the first couple, you start to get where you can catch it, which is great technique. It's really, it's one of the things I just love doing that, because it makes you better in a road car.
Yeah. It is a transferable skill.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely is. So so a few goes of that, and then with the Boxster first, and then the 911. Of course, you can again really can, especially as the speeds go a little bit higher, you can start to feel that coming in. Now, of course, we were doing this with all of the traction control off. In real life, of course, on a wet road, you would be driving with traction control on, and the car would do most of it for you.
Yes.
And you'd barely notice. You get a little flash of a light and the car would sort it out. But it was really cool to just feel that. And again, feel the difference. And it's not that one was worse than the other. I don't want people to think that that's what I'm saying, because it really isn't. It's just how different it feels.
That is, I know I said it before, but that is quite remarkable and excellent to hear. I mean, I know they're different vehicles and they are set up differently, but still to manage, because it's very easy for car companies to make cars feel very similar, albeit bigger or smaller than others in their range. And
people keep saying that they've dialed the 911-ness out of the 9, you know, all the Helmsmiths, that they've dialed the 911-ness out of the 911. It's perfectly safe, Joyce, now. And it is. It absolutely is.
As I don't end up in the trees.
Exactly.
Now. It's so disappointing.
Exactly. Yes. So that was kind of fun. It was good to sort of compare the two again in a sort of slightly clinical way.
So which did you prefer when it went?
Well, I prefer that
when you hit the black ice.
You know.
No, but which did you find it easier?
Oh, definitely the Boxster
to correct.
Well, if you think about it, because of the weights between the wheels, and it's pretty much bang on 50-50 weight distribution, then it's much easier to get, because you don't have this pendulum at the back, which if you overcorrect one is going to overcorrect the other. Yeah, the first couple the first couple with the 911 were pretty scrappy. In fact, I think I spun pretty much 180 on the first one with the 911, even though I'd had to warm up with the Boxster.
And did the driving instructor put that on his TripAdvisor review of you?
Yeah, I'm sure he will have done. Talks about boring things. Should hold
3 stars.
Should hold throttle longer. These kind of things. Yes. Brakes too soon. Almost $200,000 worth of Porsche, and there's a big concrete wall. Finished off, there is one more bit, which is a going to call it a drift pan. It is a circular handling balance, whatever they're going to fancy. It's a drift circle, which is, you know, constantly watered. If you've been to Mercedes at Brooklands, then you'll have seen one, because there's one right outside the experience center there. This one was a bit smaller. And yeah, I have never been able to drift. I'm actually not bad at the whole correcting a slide. But as a result, drifting has always been hard, because my reaction is to correct. I claim that is the correct.
Want to die on a road.
I claim that is the correct reaction to have.
I think
so. So yeah, I mean, I did okay with the 911. It took a bit to sort of jab it out of shape, and then to get it to sort of sit at an angle, and that whole balance of steering and looking in the right place, and the steering and just getting the throttle right once you've already stabbed it to get it at the back to step out and stuff is tricky. I find that hard, especially as we weren't cheating with handbrakes or anything like that, because they're electric and you can't in either car. So I did okay in that. I sort of got a couple of sort of 90-degree plus worth of drift around the circle. Then we swapped over to the Boxster again to the end, and on 2 occasions I managed to get right round the pan and get over 360 degrees. I mean I only know that because I was told, not because I was actually paying any attention to that. I was trying to just keep on going sideways, and it's fantastically satisfying when you get it out. When you can hold it there, you get what the big deal is,
right?
Because it's like it shouldn't be doing this. It's kind of engineered not to do this, and yet we can still do this, and it's really good. Look at this, and that was a lot of fun. It was just silliness. Didn't really prove that much, to be honest. But it was fun and a nice thing to round off on, and a personal best for me. So that was pretty cool as well.
Okay, so right, is there some sort of conclusion?
I was about to say
this?
There's a note here. The last note here goes conclusion, and then ... and then question mark. I don't really know what the conclusion was, to be honest, other than a 911 and a Boxster feel very different. I had a fantastic time. I absolutely loved it.
Would you recommend anyone who is listening to this show to, if they can afford to go off and avail themselves of a Porsche experience?
Yes.
I think that's a good conclusion.
It's good. I mean, this of course is specifically a Porsche experience, but any track driving, if you've never done any sort of driving sort of off the road kind of thing, then any kind of instructor-led track driving is good. I would maybe say not so much the supercar experiences, those ones where you can drive a Lamborghini in a circle. They tend to be a bit different, but definitely these kind of manufacturer-driven ones, or even some of these circuit-driven ones, which involve a race car or a car for the circuit. These ones particularly good, I think, because the cars are owned by the manufacturer. They are maintained regardless of whatever, and that gives you a much better idea of what the real thing feels like, as opposed to maybe
employed the instructor alongside you too.
Yeah, a little bit. It's what I mean is that it's a primarily perfect example. So we swapped over at the end.
Gotcha. Yeah.
To give me a lap in the Boxster, because that's what we happen to be in, of how it should be done.
Okay.
So I said at the end,
how was that for you?
Oh, it was great. I loved it. But he got in and he went, oh, hang on. No, because we had a little bit of a challenge getting... Initially, it was tricky to get the Boxster to... It had a few more miles on it, in that it had maybe 15,000 or something, if even that many. Probably less than 10, actually. But we had a bit of trouble getting it to slide. It tended to understeer a bit. And he got in, and we got halfway down the first straight, which is only like a quarter of a mile long, if even that long. And he was like, hang on, the steering's off on this. It's out. That's out by about a degree. No wonder it felt a little bit weird. I'll need to get that sorted.
So then you could inflate your chest and go, look.
I mean, obviously I knew that. I'd picked up on that.
And you managed to managed to deal with that.
Yeah, but that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, like the sort of attention to detail. So I mean, it's like trying to. I mean, we have a rule: if we have a hire car, we don't do a review of hire cars, because you never know what's happened to a hire car.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas these were much more like a press car, in that go back to manufacturer. Manufacturer does everything to it all the time, and it's always perfect, or in some cases with some companies possibly better than perfect. But in this case, it's always just as it would be if you drove it out of the showroom.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked both. I have this thing. I think I've said it before on the podcast of chasing a Porsche. Every time I kind of get to the stage where I can afford the Porsche that I happen to desire at that time, then it just moves one step out. It's just that something has happened, which means if it's a classic one, then the classic prices have risen. It's just out of reach again. And my thing with normal is not very good in the whole wanting to go for a PCP, so hence I don't lease a Porsche or whatever. It's always just that bit out of reach for me. This has just made that yearning a little bit worse. I really enjoyed this. I really liked the cars, and yeah, it was a jolly good day out. That yes, I absolutely.
Well, I'm
would
glad
recommend.
you got to experience the cars, and I'm glad you got to go around and see what happens at these places. It's very easy for these to, for such a thing that you go, oh, I'm just on the track, and you don't see what goes on behind the scenes, and it's always fascinating to see how. Well, I think it is anyway. I'm fascinated to see how manufacturers are recognizing their back catalogue and that people still want that, and they want it as authentic as they can get it, as in they want Porsche to handle
I think Porsche they've always been very aware of history, and I think they trade on it an awful lot. I mean, they really do. And at
there's
some
plenty
point,
to do,
not nowadays, but in the past, I think they've had to trade on it to survive. There have been times in maybe the 90s and stuff when that was a necessity. I don't think it is now. I don't think it's a necessity now. But I think if they stopped doing it, I think there would be a massive outcry. Not just from people who sit on the sidelines in the peanut gallery, but also from
those of us who can't afford.
Well,
we're still entitled to an opinion.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
I know you're not. I know you're not. I'm poking at you.
And
from the peanut gallery.
But for I forgot where I was going now.
But yes, you're absolutely right. You were about to say, but from those people who have the cash and who are customers,
they would be upset too.
There would be a massive backlash.
Yeah, and the whole seeing the classic thing was part of that,
Yeah.
And how successful that's been, and how, which I think that surprised Porsche as well, to be honest. But Mercedes do the same thing. BMW actually do the same thing as well. I mean,
JLR,
totally. Well, they've got to with J, haven't they? It's nothing new. But yes, absolutely. Any wise manufacturer is going to trade on that history to a bit. Hopefully, not be bound by it, but hopefully trade on it and leverage it.
But acknowledge it and embrace it and have it as part of what they are.
Totally. So, last thing really is to say a massive thanks to Angus for sorting that and organising it, and also acting as a soundboard to compare notes on being a Brit living in America, and
as a soundboard. So he stood there while you moaned. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely not. I stood there while he moaned as well. It was perfectly balanced.
Okay.
And then we went out and we poked at the Lexus because he was interested in that, which surprised me a lot. So, but yeah, no, it was great. Thank you so much for organising that, and also thank you to Garrett, the instructor, for suffering my driving and my company for an hour and a half.
Yes,
in closed confines. So yeah, no, it was really.
You've gone above and beyond there, Garrett.
Yeah. I think that's it. I think we have waffled an awful lot. But yeah, it was.
No, but it's good. It's good to know. It's good to pick your brains when you're going through things, and and I'm delighted. I'm so glad you managed to do it, and I'm so thankful to Angus and Garrett for hosting you, because that's one of those, once in a long while type experiences you'll have.
Especially at the minute when I'm suffering from car launch and car event withdrawal symptoms. It was a good antidote to some of that. Round off then? I don't think there's anything else to say.
I think so.
So everyone, don't forget, between now and next time, you can give us any feedback and share your thoughts to the show at Motoring Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, on Facebook, and on the contact page of motoringpodcast.com, the hub of all our activities. Please don't forget to leave a review and rating on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or however your podcast app lets you do such a thing. Andrew, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Best way to get in touch with me is if you search for Crack Windscreen on Twitter or Mastodon, or you can try and find me under my proper name on LinkedIn. And Alan, if people would like to pick your brains more, or maybe just go, we're so terribly jealous of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Pretty much any of the social medias used by the over 35s. On all of them, I am at AJP Bradley. That's Bradley. We'll be back next week, but until then, I've been Alan Bradley.
I've been Andrew Clues.
And safe motoring.